welcome everyone. This is June 1st, our second night with Venerable Sangye Khadro on what is Buddha nature. And Venerable Carol will start us off to offer the mandala on behalf of the center.
Welcome, Venerable Sangye Khadro. So nice to have you back.
Nice to be back.
Sajipuki Juxing Meto Tramri Robling Ji Ni De Gyan Padi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Uwagi Trokunam Dakshingla Chupasho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam La Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chanyan Ge Pesonam Ki Drola Panchir Sangye Droparsho Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam La Janchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chanyan Ge Pesonam Ki Drola Panchir Sangye Droparsho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Okay, so can everyone hear me okay? Good. So welcome everyone and happy June the 1st. We're almost halfway through the year. So let's spend a few minutes settling our mind down and generating a positive motivation for being here, participating in this talk. So check your body and try to sit in a position that is comfortable, but at the same time conducive for listening to Dharma teaching. That means it's good if you can to sit up straight, have your back straight. And if you're sitting cross-legged, just have your legs crossed in whatever way is comfortable for you. If you're sitting in a chair, just have your feet flat on the floor, not one leg crossed over the other. So you can imagine how you would sit if you were in an actual meditation room or teaching room in front of a teacher. But it's also important to be relaxed. So that means trying not to have any tension anywhere in your body. Like sometimes we have tension in our shoulders or back or neck. So try to notice if you do have tension in any of those places or any other place. And if you do, see if you can let it go. You can just put your awareness at that place and invite the tension to go away, to disappear, to evaporate, flow out of you. And just release the tension as much as you can. And let your breathing be natural. Allow the body to breathe on its own without controlling or manipulating the breath. Just let the breath be natural. And for a few minutes, just be aware of the breath as it's flowing in and flowing out. Again, without controlling it, just allowing it to happen. But with your mind, just gently noticing, observing, being aware of the breath as it's coming in and going out. So doing this helps our mind to settle down, because often our mind is wandering here and there, especially to the past or the future or other places. When we pay attention to our breathing, our mind is right here where we are and right now in the present moment, because that's where our breath is. So it helps our mind to settle down in the present, the here and now. And if there are any thoughts in your mind, let them go, put them aside. You can always take them up again later. But just really try to decide that for this period of time, you will stay in the present and stay attentive to what we are doing here. Now, let's think about why we are here. So if we ask ourselves, what is our motivation for being here? We might find curiosity, wanting to learn more about this topic, to have a better understanding of it. But then why do we want to have an understanding of this topic of Buddha nature? Is it in order to just increase our knowledge, which could increase our ego, our arrogance? People can sometimes be impressed with somebody who knows a lot and can talk about things. And so that could increase our sense of pride or arrogance, our concern about what other people think about us, our reputation, and so on. So ideally, we shouldn't have those kind of concerns. The best attitude we could have for listening to a talk like this is the altruistic attitude of wanting to benefit other people, other beings. We all do feel that way sometimes. We all feel that we would like to help relieve suffering, problems for individual people, and also for our community, for our country, for the world. Get in touch with that feeling. Feel how nice it would be if we could be helpful to others, help others to have less suffering, both physical and mental or emotional, and to help others have greater peace and happiness. And if we can learn more about the Buddha's teachings, which show us how we can develop ourselves, develop our potential to be more and more beneficial for others, culminating in the state of enlightenment, becoming a Buddha, an enlightened being who is able to help all living beings throughout the universe and guide them out of suffering and the causes of suffering, guide them to peace, to liberation, and eventually to enlightenment itself. So how wonderful that would be if we could become a Buddha and do the work of a Buddha, benefiting all living beings. So if you're comfortable with that idea, you can think that is your reason, your motivation for being here and learning about this topic, so that you can benefit all living beings in the best possible way. But if you're not sure if you really believe in enlightenment and your ability to reach enlightenment, and if that's really what you want to do, then try to at least have the wish to benefit others and to learn something here tonight that will help you in your life to be of greater benefit to others and to learn how to not cause suffering and problems to others. Okay, so tonight I'll start by just quickly reviewing some of the main points we looked at last time. Then we'll go on to some additional material. So, Gina, you have the slides?
Sure. Do you want last week's slides or the new ones?
The new ones,
Okay, yes.
the one I sent you.
Good, because those are the ones I have. There you go.
Okay, so after reviewing what we looked at last time, I'll talk about how Buddha nature is explained in other traditions, because last time we looked at the Madhyamika school, how they explain Buddha nature. So the first slide is, the next slide is a review of that. Yeah, so Madhyamika means middle way. And this is one school of Buddhist philosophy that the Tibetans regard as the most correct and, the most accurate explanation of things, how things exist. It was started by the Indian master Nagarjuna, and there's a long tradition going back to him, and then over many centuries in India and then in Tibet. So anyway, Madhyamika. And so according to that school, Madhyamika, in general, Buddha nature is something that will transform into a Buddha body or Buddha kaya. And we shouldn't think here of body as something made of flesh, blood, bones, but it's more of, the way I think of it is a kind of way of existing, and an aspect of a Buddha, an enlightened being. And so Buddha nature is something that will become one of the bodies of a Buddha. And there's two kinds of Buddha nature. The first is called the naturally abiding Buddha nature. And I put / lineage because the actual term used in Tibetan and probably in Sanskrit as well does have more the sense of lineage or disposition. So that's the term you find sometimes in the philosophical texts. So anyway, the naturally abiding one refers to the emptiness of a mind that has not yet abandoned defilements. So the next slide, when we get to the next slide, I'll explain what the defilements are. These are the things that we have to clear away. We have to get rid of in our mind in order for our mind to become a Buddha's mind. So a mind that still has defilements is like my mind. And in fact, all sentient beings, all beings who are not yet Buddhas, that's the meaning of a sentient being. A sentient being is a being who's not yet a Buddha. So sentient beings still have defilements in their mind, and that's why they're sentient beings and not Buddhas. Okay, so our minds, the minds of sentient beings, have as their ultimate nature emptiness, emptiness of inherent existence, emptiness of true existence. That's the ultimate nature, the real nature of our minds. So that emptiness, the emptiness of our minds, is the naturally abiding Buddha nature. And that, when we become a Buddha, that will transform into a Buddha's nature body, or the Sanskrit term is svabhava vikaya. And that simply refers to the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. So the Buddha's mind also has emptiness as its true nature or ultimate nature. But in the case of a Buddha, basically the emptiness of our mind and the emptiness of the Buddha's mind are the same. One emptiness and another emptiness are basically the same. You can't say one is better than another. But emptiness is always the quality of something. It's like the real nature of something. And so we can differentiate emptinesses by the things that have emptiness as their quality. So my mind has emptiness as its quality. Buddha's mind also has emptiness as its quality. And the emptiness is the same, but our minds are not the same. My mind is still full of delusions. Buddha's mind is completely pure, free of all delusions. So from that point of view, we can differentiate the emptiness of my mind and the emptiness of a Buddha's mind. So the emptiness of a Buddha's mind is called the nature body, the svabhava vikaya. So that's one kind of Buddha nature. The second one is called the transforming or the developing Buddha nature or Buddha lineage. And this refers to the aspects of our mind that will transform into one of the other Buddha kayas, Buddha bodies, such as the wisdom truth body. That's the term that refers to the Buddha's omniscient mind. So the Buddha's mind itself, the Buddha's mind, which is omniscient, knows everything, sees everything, is free of all negativities and defilements and everything that's negative and mistaken is gone. And all the good qualities are fully developed, fully perfected, love, compassion, and so on. So the mind of the Buddha is called the wisdom truth body. And there's parts of our mind that will transform into the Buddha's mind when we become enlightened, such as our wisdom. We have wisdom. It's not very developed right now, at least mine isn't. But we develop our wisdom and eventually it becomes enlightened wisdom. And also compassion. We do have compassion, we do have loving kindness, we have these positive qualities. They're not so developed right now, but if we continue developing them, purifying them, increasing them more and more and more, eventually our compassion will become a Buddha's compassion. So the good qualities of our mind and also just the basic nature of our mind, like the clear and knowing nature of our mind, these are things that will transform into the Buddha's mind when we become enlightened. And also the form bodies of a Buddha, called the Rupakaya. A Buddha has the ability to manifest in different forms and help sentient beings all over the universe. So again, there's aspects of our mind that will become the Buddha's form body when we become enlightened. So the next slide is talking about the defilements that need to be cleared away. Or they're also called obscuration. That's another term. So basically becoming a Buddha requires removing two kinds of obscurations from our mind. First one is called afflictive obscurations, and these include all of our afflictive emotions, our delusions, they're sometimes called disturbing emotions. And they include ignorance, not knowing the true nature of things, hatred or anger, which we all know very well, I do anyway, attachment, which is probably even more prevalent than anger, always grasping at things, wanting things more and more and more. And those are just some of our afflictive obscurations, but there's also jealousy and pride or arrogance and so on. So these afflictive aspects of our mind are included in the afflictive obscurations. And we have to abandon those if we want to become a Buddha. And they also have their seeds. That means just like a plant, a flower or a tree produces seeds which fall on the ground and then become the cause for more plants, the same kind of plant growing the next year, and so on and so forth. So all these afflictive obscurations also have their seeds. And so that's why we get angry today, and it leaves a seed on our mind that will cause anger to arise again tomorrow or next week or next year or next life. Okay, so the seeds of our afflictive emotions means that they keep arising again and again and again. So we want to get rid of all the afflictive emotions together with their seeds so that they will never arise again. And these afflictive obscurations are sometimes compared to garlic or something else that's really smelly. I hope nobody is offended by that, but maybe some people like the smell of garlic. But yeah, it does have a strong odor. For me, not a very pleasant odor. So so it's something quite smelly in our mind. And that'll make more sense when we get to the second kind of the obscuration. So the second one is, sometimes it's translated as knowledge obscurations, or some translators use cognitive obscurations. Another translation is obscurations to omniscience. These are the actual things that prevent our mind from becoming fully enlightened. The first kind of obscuration, the afflictive ones, these prevent the attainment of nirvana or liberation. Those are the things we have to get rid of in order to attain nirvana. But we don't have to get rid of the second kind in order to attain nirvana. You can attain nirvana and still have the knowledge obscurations. But if you want to become a fully enlightened Buddha, you have to get rid of the knowledge obscurations, the second one, or cognitive obscurations. And these are the imprints of ignorance and the other afflictive emotions. So imprints are more subtle than the afflictions and their seeds. And they cause, for example, they cause us to continue seeing things as if they were inherently existing, even though they're not, even though things are empty of inherent existence. But we still see things as if they were inherently existing. And this is because we have the imprints of ignorance. So even after getting rid of the afflictive obscurations like ignorance and its seeds, that's gone from the mind. But there's still this tendency for things to appear inherently existing, because that's how we've been seeing things for such a long time, like from beginningless time. So it's very hard to get rid of that. And so this kind of obscuration is compared to the smell of garlic, because they say if you had garlic in a container for a while, then it smells quite strong. And even if you take the garlic away, throw it away or put it somewhere else, the smell of the garlic will still be there, will still linger in that container for a while. So these obscurations, the second kind, are compared to that. It's like the smell of the afflictive emotions is still there, lingering in our mind and preventing us from attaining the omniscient mind of a Buddha. So those have to be cleared away for our mind to become fully enlightened, a Buddhist mind. So those are the things we have to get rid of. And the good news is that they are not permanent fixtures in our mind. They are not, the expression they use is, they are not in the nature of the mind, so they can be removed. It is possible to separate our mind from the obscurations. The obscurations are not like, permanent parts of our mind and impossible to separate them. They can be separated. So we can take away these obscurations, discard them, get rid of them, and our mind will still be there with its potential and its positive qualities. So they say that is why it is possible for us to become enlightened, because we can get rid of these obscurations. Okay, so all sentient beings have Buddha nature. What about a Buddha? Does Buddha have Buddha nature? Anyone have an idea?
Yes, I think a Buddha must have Buddha nature. I mean, it's just developed, or it's clear. It's the obscurations are removed.
Well, according to the definition of Buddha nature, the definition of Buddha nature is it's like the emptiness, the naturally abiding Buddha nature is the emptiness of a mind that has obscurations, that still has defilements. So does Buddha have that?
No.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. You kind of think, oh, Buddha has to have Buddha nature. But then if you look at the definition, no, it doesn't fit. So Buddha nature only applies to sentient beings, those of us who are not yet Buddhas. And then when we do become Buddhas, yeah, I mean, in a way you can say our Buddha nature transforms into the Buddha's mind and the Buddha's qualities and the Buddha kayas. So it's no longer called Buddha nature. No, we no longer use the term Buddha nature for the Buddha. But anyway, that's just a tricky question. Okay, so then that was the Madhyamika school. And now let's look at some of the other traditions of Buddhism and how they explain this topic. So the next slide, not all Buddhist schools use the term Buddha nature, but they do use this term lineage or disposition, which I said last time. The Sanskrit term is gotra and the Tibetan term is rik. And that is translated, different translators use different English words. Some say lineage or disposition or trait or family. It's kind of a difficult word to translate. So I'll just stick with lineage and disposition. So that term is used in all other Buddhist schools. And we're going to go through these schools and look at how they explain it. So in the Pali tradition, Pali is a language used by Buddhists in Southeast Asia, like Thailand and Sri Lanka, Burma, and so on, the Theravada schools of Buddhism. So they use, their scriptures are in Pali language. And so His Holiness the Dalai Lama often talks about the Pali tradition. You may have heard him use that term, the Pali tradition, as opposed to the Sanskrit tradition. That's the one we follow. So the Pali tradition is followed in more in the Southeast Asian countries. So in the Pali scriptures, they don't have this term Buddha nature. But the Buddha talked about certain characteristics. For example, having few desires, not having a huge number of desires, but very, very few desires, and a sense of contentment, being content with having a simple life and, not greedy. It's kind of the opposite of being greedy and materialistic and always wanting more and more and more. So those are characteristics that Buddha identified. And people who have these characteristics, this shows their inclination towards liberation and their potential to attain realization. So somebody who has those kind of characteristics means they, are inclined to attain liberation or nirvana and to attain the realizations of the path. So anyway, that's how this topic of lineage is explained in the Pali tradition. And there's a sutra in the Pali canon called the Pabhasara Sutra. Pabhasara, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but anyway, it means luminous. And it's actually the same term that we translate as clear light. You've probably heard that term. They talk about that in the Tibetan tradition, the clear light nature of the mind, clear light. So it's the same term, but here it's translated as luminous. And here the Buddha spoke of the clear light nature of the mind and the possibility of removing the defilements. So the next slide is this sutra. This is like a whole sutra. It's just 2 paragraphs, very short, but. So the Buddha said, this mind, O monastics, is luminous, but it is defiled by adventitious defilements. The uninstructed worldling does not understand this as it really is. Therefore, for him or her, there's no mental development. So uninstructed means they just haven't learned the Dharma, and worldling is they're just kind of an ordinary person in the world. And so such a person doesn't know the nature of their mind and therefore cannot develop their mind. That's basically what he's saying. And the second paragraph said, this mind, O monastics, is luminous, and it is freed from adventitious defilements. The instructed Arya disciple understands this as it really is. Therefore, for him, there is mental development. So Arya, some of you may have come across this term. It refers to a person who has realized emptiness, who's realized the true nature of things directly, who has a direct realization of emptiness, the true nature of things. And so a person like that, who is knowledgeable, who's been instructed, and who has this realization of emptiness, understands the nature of their mind, that it's luminous or clear light, and that it can be separated from the defilements, that the defilements are not permanent fixtures in the mind, they can be removed. And so for such a person, there is mental development, there is the possibility for their mind to be developed. So that points out how important it is for us to understand the nature of our mind and to understand that the defilements like ignorance, greed, hatred, and so on can be removed from the mind, are not permanent parts of the mind. So not everybody may realize that. There's some people in the world who recognize that, yeah, anger is not a good thing and greed isn't a good thing. And, there's lots of things in us that aren't very good, but what can we do about it? They're there. And, we just have to make the best of it. We can't get rid of them. So there's probably a lot of people who think that way, even psychologists, even philosophers, even scientists. So if you think that way, if you think, oh, it's impossible to get rid of these defilements, they're stuck. We're like hardwired, hardwired to have these defilements in our mind, these disturbing emotions in our mind. There's nothing we can do about it. Then you don't even try. You wouldn't even make the effort to try to get rid of them. So it's really important to look at that and think about that and ask, is it true that I can get rid of my defilements? Or are they permanent fixtures, hardwired into my mind? So the Buddha said it is possible, and many of his followers have done it. They've gotten rid of their defilements, their obscurations, and reached nirvana and reached enlightenment. So they say it can be done. It is possible. So I was really happy to encounter this sutra because I thought, I'm really fascinated by this term clear light, which comes up a lot in the Mahayana teachings. But it was really interesting to find out it's also in the Pali Canon. So I'm still mystified by what it actually means. Why does the Buddha use this word luminous? Because, you know, it sounds like the mind is light. It's it's giving out light. I've yet to come across an understanding of that, but maybe one day. Maybe I have to realize it first and then I'll understand it. Okay, so that's the Pali tradition. And then next is a school called Vibhashika. So some of you may have studied with Geshe Dragpa or with other teachers the topic called tenets. This is one of the topics the Tibetan monks and nuns study in their monasteries. They go through different schools of Buddhist philosophy and what each school says about this and about that and so on. It's kind of a complex subject, but anyway, this is one of those schools. It's called Vaibhashika, which is translated as the Great Exposition School. So this is one of the schools of Buddhist philosophy that traces its teachings back to the Buddha. So the way they explain this topic of lineage, they also don't use the term Buddha nature. They don't say Buddha nature, but they talk about the Arya lineage. And again, Arya means a being who's directly realized the true nature of things. And so how they explain it is that it's the virtuous mental factor of non-attachment that acts as the cause for Arya realizations. So again, some of you may have studied the topic called Lorig, where you learn about the mind and the mental factors, all the different mental factors. Some of them are virtuous, some of them are negative or delusions, and some of them are neutral in between. So anyway, there's 11 virtuous mental factors that we have, and one of those is called non-attachment, and that's the opposite of attachment. So attachment is when we have clinging, grasping, craving for things, hoping that they will bring us happiness forever after, and wanting them to be permanent and always there and never change. So that's one of the deluded, unwholesome mental factors. So non-attachment is the opposite of that. Non-attachment is not having attachment to things like money and food and our bodies and so on and so forth. Because of realizing that they're impermanent, they're not going to last forever, and they cannot give us lasting satisfaction. So what's the point of being attached to them? So there's a certain amount of wisdom involved in that. But anyway, non-attachment, the opposite of attachment. So that mental factor, they say that is the Arya lineage or disposition. And because they regard craving as a very important cause of suffering. You know, craving is a huge factor in our existence in samsara and being stuck in samsara and not being able to get out of samsara. So they're very concerned about overcoming craving. So non-attachment is the antidote to craving, clinging, grasping, and so on. So non-attachment is the cause for gaining the Arya realizations. And they say that Aryas, again, those who realized emptiness, who have this disposition have 4 qualities. The first three are that they are satisfied with whatever food and clothes and shelter they have. So Buddhist monastics, monks and nuns, it's part of our training to learn to be satisfied and content with the things that we have. Like we're supposed to just eat the food that's given to us by lay donors and so forth, and also clothing and shelter. So traditionally, that's how Buddhist monks and nuns lived. They would go on alms round and just collect food in their bowl. You're not supposed to be fussy about what you get. You just have to accept whatever is given to you and not complain and not ask for more, not ask for better. Just, accept and be happy with that, be content with that. And then same with clothing. At the time of the Buddha, the monks and nuns would get rags from the rubbish, the garbage, or from cemeteries, like shrouds that the bodies would be wrapped up in. And so they just collect these old bits of cloth and sew them together. And that's what they wore for their clothing. So yeah, you have to be content with what you get. And then shelter, again, just be content, not fussy about having a big mansion. So even if it's just a little hut, be content with that. So learning to be content with those three things. And then the fourth one is taking joy in meditation and in overcoming what is to be abandoned. Okay, so this is another quality of the Aryas. They're delighted to do meditation and to work on their minds to overcome the defilements, the obscurations, greed, hatred, ignorance, and so on, that have to be overcome in order to attain nirvana, liberation. So those are the four qualities. And it said that by practicing the first three, one overcomes attachment to mine. We normally, even as little kids, we start thinking, this is mine. You can't have this toy. It's mine. Don't touch my toy. So mine is a big part of our life. This is mine. So that's something we have to overcome, the attachment to mind. So the first three help us overcome that. And then the fourth one helps us to overcome ignorance and attachment to I, the self. So that's even more subtle, the sense of an I, a real, fixed, independently existing, permanent I. Buddha said that's the root of all our suffering. That's the thing we have to overcome to be free of our suffering. So they overcome that by meditating. So Aryas, the last point says, Aryas are born from these four factors. So that's why they are called Arya lineages. So having non-attachment and cultivating it more and more enables us to become an Arya and eventually attain nirvana, liberation. So the potential to achieve that, to do all these things, is the Arya lineage or disposition. Okay, the next one, another Buddhist school, is called Sutrantika, or Sutra followers. And it's somewhat similar to the previous one. They say that the lineage or disposition is the potential or seed for an uncontaminated mind, an Arya's wisdom. So the word uncontaminated here, it doesn't have anything to do with, toxic wastes or radiation or anything like that. But contaminated refers to ignorance, the ignorance believing in inherent existence, a false mode of existence. So anytime our mind is affected by ignorance, then it's contaminated. Uncontaminated means free of this influence of ignorance, grasping it. things as if they existed in a true way, an inherent way. So an Arya's wisdom is uncontaminated. So the potential or seed to attain this wisdom is the meaning of the lineage or disposition. And they say that all sentient beings have this potential. Why? Because we all have virtue. Every sentient being has virtue. And the way they come to that idea is because all sentient beings experience happiness sometimes, and happiness is the result of virtue. Okay, so we all do have happiness and good experiences. And according to karma, the law of karma, the happiness we experience is the result of virtue we created in the past. We must have created virtue, like giving, practicing the 10 virtuous actions, practicing generosity. So we must have done good things in the past in order to have good experiences now, happiness and good experiences. And all sentient beings, at least sometimes, so even animals, for example, they are happy when their food bowl is full, or they get to lie in the sun on a cold day, or near the heater, or they get stroked by their master. So they're very, very happy. So that happiness that they experience is the result of virtue. So even though we say animal, being born as an animal, that's an unfortunate rebirth. But they do, at least some animals do experience happiness, especially pets, people's pets. People take care of their pets very well, and so their pets are very comfortable and happy. So that's the result of some virtue they created in the past. So every sentient being has virtue, and therefore all sentient beings do have the potential to attain this uncontaminated mind and Arya's wisdom. But in order for that potential to grow and transform into an Arya's wisdom, we need to learn the Dharma and think about the Dharma, reflect on it, and meditate on it. So as an animal, there's not much chance of doing that. I mean, you could take your dog to Dharma teachings and recite mantras for them and so on and so forth. So there's leaving some seeds in their mind, but they can't really understand the Dharma as an animal. But at least we can help them create the cause to be born as a human being sometime in the future, and then they can listen to Dharma teachings and understand them, reflect on them, meditate on them, and so on. And in that way, they can develop their potential to attain the Arya's wisdom and then eventually attain liberation or nirvana. So now this school and the previous one, Vaibhashika, both Vaibhashika and Sautrantika say that only some beings become Buddhas, everyone else will attain nirvana. So they don't say all sentient beings have a Buddha nature and all sentient beings will become Buddhas. They say just some, probably a very small number of beings will become a Buddha, but everybody else, the majority of beings, will attain nirvana, liberation. And that's good enough, I think, from their point of view. Okay, so there's one more school to look at, and this is called the Chittamatra, which means mind only. And another term for the school is Yogacara. This is a Mahayana school. And so they do talk about Buddha nature. They do talk about beings having the potential to become Buddhas, to become fully enlightened Buddhas. So what do they say? What is the lineage or disposition? So this is just talking in general about lineage or disposition, not so much Buddha nature, but they say there's a seed that's the source of good qualities. Okay, so sentient beings have in their mind. Now, when we say seed, you shouldn't think of an actual physical seed like a flower seed or a vegetable seed. It's something non-physical, something that's in our mind, part of our mind. It's sometimes also translated as potential. potential. So it's a potential in our mind that can give rise to good qualities. Now this school is a little bit complicated. They talk about 5 different types of lineage. The first one is hearer, or the Sanskrit is Shravaka. So this is a type of follower of the Buddha who aspires to become, to attain nirvana, to attain liberation. And so according to this school, there's certain people who have the seed or the potential to follow that path, the hearer path. And signs of this kind of person, it's somebody who has a strong wish to attain nirvana, to attain liberation. They really want to be free of samsara, cyclic existence, and they live ethically. They're very ethical, well-behaved, and they refrain from non-virtue and create virtue, and they purify their bad karma, and they're very intent on attaining nirvana. So those are the kind of qualities or characteristics of this type of person. So yeah, some people have the seed to be a hearer and to follow the hearer path to nirvana, to liberation. And the second one is called solitary realizer, or pratyeka Buddha, Sanskrit. And these are similar to the first one. They also want to attain nirvana, and they live very ethically, create virtue, avoid non-virtue. But they tend to like solitude. They don't like to be with other people so much. They prefer to be alone, meditate on their own. And also solitary realizers are particularly drawn to the Buddhist teachings on the 12 links of dependent origination, which some of you probably heard about. It's kind of a complicated topic, but they really like that topic. They learn about it, they meditate on it. That's their main kind of object of meditation. And so now there's some people who have that inclination and they follow the solitary realizer path and also attain nirvana. And then the third type of lineage is the Bodhisattva or Mahayana. So there are certain people who have just they're naturally empathetic and compassionate. They care about other sentient beings and really want to help sentient beings. And they aspire to become Buddhas, to become fully enlightened Buddhas in order to help all sentient beings. And they want to follow the Bodhisattva path, practice the 6 perfections, and do whatever needs to be done in order to become a Buddha. So people like that have the seed of the Bodhisattva lineage. So the first 3 are definite lineages, meaning there are people who are definite to follow one of those 3 paths. They have certain characteristics, they go for those paths, they follow those paths, and they don't kind of switch. The 4th type of lineage is called indefinite. So this means that there are some people who don't have a definite connection with any of the 3 paths, but it depends on what kind of teacher they meet and what kind of teachings they receive. Okay, so if they happen to meet a Mahayana teacher who teaches the Mahayana path, then they go with that one. But if they happen to meet a hearer teacher who's teaching them the hearer path, they go with that one. Or if they meet a solitary realizer teacher teaching that path, they go with that one. So that means they could go on any of those 3 paths, depending on circumstances. The 5th lineage is called severed. This is bad news. this means that there are some beings who have done really, really bad things, really negative actions, or they have very strong wrong views, and they don't care about karma. They don't care about the effects of their actions. They think, oh, I can do anything and it doesn't matter. They have no interest at all in attaining liberation or enlightenment. And so according to one, there's two types of Chittamatras. One is called the followers of scripture and the other is the followers of reasoning. So those who follow scripture say that people who have this type of lineage, a severed lineage, will never attain liberation or enlightenment. They're like a lost cause. Very sad. But the other Chittamatrans and the Madhyamikas don't agree with that. They say, no, there's no such person, and nobody will be stuck in samsara forever and ever and ever. But there actually is a quotation in a sutra that where the Buddha did talk about this. He did say, there's certain really, really bad beings and they're kind of a lost cause. But the other schools say Buddha didn't mean that literally. He was just saying that in order to get people to behave themselves. But they took it literally. So the bottom 2 points, I left out an I there. Anyway, these are talking about the 2 types of Chittamatrans. Those who follow scripture assert 3 final vehicles, and that some beings will never attain nirvana. So the meaning of final vehicle, this is actually a topic of discussion among the different Buddhist schools, at least in the Mahayana. Saying that there are 3 final vehicles means the first 3, the hearers, solitary realizers, bodhisattvas, beings who are following those paths will reach their goal and then they will stay there. They won't go any further. They won't change. So a hearer attains nirvana, hearer nirvana, and that's it for them. Solitary realizer will attain their nirvana, and that's it for them. They stop there. Bodhisattva will attain Buddhahood, and of course, that's it, because you can't go any further than that. So they say these first 3 vehicles or paths are final. And you reach the end, and that's it. You stop there. And this school also says some beings will never attain nirvana. Those who have the severed lineage, they will never even attain nirvana. That's very sad. But the other type of Chittamatrans, the followers of reasoning, they assert 1 final vehicle. What that means is number 1 and number 2 on this list, the hearers will attain nirvana, and they may stay in nirvana for a while, blissing out in meditation, but eventually the Buddha will kind of wake them up out of their meditation and let them know that they have more work to do, and then they will enter the Mahayana path, follow the Mahayana path, and eventually become Buddhas. Same with the solitary realizers. They attain their nirvana, but eventually will enter the Mahayana and attain Buddhahood. And the bodhisattvas are striving for Buddhahood right from the beginning. So that means everybody, every sentient being will eventually, ultimately become a Buddha. They will become a bodhisattva, follow the Mahayana path, and then become a Buddha. And this is also what the Madhyamikas say. The Madhyamika school agrees with that. They say everybody will eventually become a Buddha. Nobody will be left behind in samsara or even in nirvana. Buddha will make sure everybody gets to Buddhahood. Everybody gets to enlightenment. So that's a nice ending to the story. Okay, next slide is also about Chittamatra. This is focusing particularly on the Buddha lineage or Buddha disposition. So those who do have the disposition to follow the Mahayana path and reach enlightenment, they say there are two kinds of this. So this is similar to the Madhyamika that we looked at before, two kinds of Buddha lineage, but the way they explain it is a little different than Madhyamika. So the first one is the naturally abiding lineage, same term as before. So they say this is an uncontaminated seed existing in sentient beings' minds for beginningless time. Okay, so all sentient beings have within our minds this uncontaminated seed, and it's been there forever. It's been there from beginningless time. And it's called naturally abiding lineage when it hasn't yet been nourished by hearing the Dharma and so on. Okay, so sentient beings who haven't yet heard the Dharma and learned about the path to enlightenment. So they have this seed in them, but it hasn't yet been nourished or ripened. So it's existing more like as a potential. And then the second type of Buddha nature, the transforming or developing lineage, it's the same seed, uncontaminated seed that's been in our mind from beginningless time, but it's been nourished by hearing the Dharma and so on. So once, like for ourselves, we have heard the Dharma, we have heard about the path to enlightenment, and we're trying to learn more about it all the time. So they would say that our seed has been nourished. It's like when you take a seed and it can sit for years and nothing happens with it, doesn't grow into anything until you put it in the soil and you add some water, and then the seed will start to grow and turn into a plant. So that's like here, you know, when learning, hearing the Dharma, learning the Dharma, meditating on the Dharma and so on is like the water that nourishes the seed in the mind so that it can start to grow and produce all the good qualities of enlightenment. So they say that, yeah, that's what the Buddha lineage is the seed in the sentient being's mind. And both types of lineage are compounded phenomena or impermanent. So compounded phenomena, impermanent phenomena are things that arise from causes and conditions, and they change moment by moment. They're that kind of nature. So this is different than the Madhyamika school, because in the Madhyamika school, they say that the naturally abiding lineage is the emptiness of our mind, the emptiness of inherent existence of our mind. And emptiness is an uncompounded phenomenon. It's uncompounded, it's permanent. It's not something arising from causes and conditions, changing moment by moment. So, and again, that emptiness of our mind is what turns into the nature body of the Buddha, the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. So this is one difference between the Chittamatra and the Madhyamika, in that the Madhyamikas say one type of Buddha nature is a permanent, uncompounded phenomena. And then where is this seed located? Again, the two types of Chittamatra have a different answer to that. The Chittamatra following scripture, they say that it's in the mind basis of all, the alaya vijnana. So that school talks about this kind of mind. It's the only school that talks about this. None of the other Buddhist schools talk about this, but they say that we have this one type of mind, which is called the alaya vijnana. Sometimes it's called the mind basis of all. Sometimes it's called the storehouse consciousness. This one type of mind that functions as a storehouse. It holds all the seeds of everything we have ever done, like karmic seeds, but also the seeds of our experiences, all the experiences that we have, seeing and hearing and feeling and thinking. Every experience we have leaves a seed in that part of our mind, the mind basis of all. And then those seeds are carried from one life to the next, and so on and so forth. And they become the cause of all the experiences we have in this life. So all the experiences we have in this life are the result of seeds planted in our mind basis of all in past lives. The other Buddhist schools say, no, that's like fantasy, a fairy tale, no such thing exists. But anyway, they believe that. So they say that's where this uncontaminated seed, the Buddha nature, that's where it's located. The other type of Chitamatrans, those following reasoning, they don't believe in the mind basis of all. So they say it's the mental consciousness. So the mental consciousness is our sixth type of mind, that part of our mind that has thoughts and feelings, emotions, memory streams, and so on. So that's where the seed is deposited and carried from one life to another up until enlightenment. Okay, so there's one more slide. Tantra or Vajrayana, which is very prevalent in Tibetan Buddhism. Probably some of you have taken tantric initiations and may do tantric practices. So they also have a unique way of explaining Buddha nature, at least in the highest Yoga Tantra. I don't know at the other schools, but the highest Yoga Tantra, that's the highest, the fourth class of Tantra. They say that Buddha nature is the very subtle mind of clear light that is inseparable from the very subtle wind. So this very subtle mind of clear light is only explained in highest Yoga Tantra. So they say that our mind has different levels or different layers. There's very gross minds, like our daily life minds of our five senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, and so on, and our thoughts and our emotions. So all of that constitutes the gross or coarse level of mind. So that's where we spend most of our time, on that level. And then there's a subtler level below that, which mainly only manifests before we die. As we die, we go through the process of dying. Our mind goes from a very coarse level to a subtler level, then to the very subtle level. The very subtle level of mind is called clear light, the clear light mind. And it's actually there all the time, but we don't notice it. It doesn't manifest because we're so occupied with our coarse, gross experiences. But at the time of death, when we're dying, the coarse levels of mind stop functioning, disappear. Our mind goes to a deeper level and eventually to this very subtle mind of clear light. And that's the actual mind that transitions from this life to the next, takes rebirth. So they say that very subtle mind of clear light, that is the Buddha nature. That's our Buddha nature. That's the thing that's going to go to Buddhahood. And it's said to be inseparable from very subtle wind. So wind is like energy, chi, prana. And we have different kinds of winds in our body that help our body function. But there's also a very subtle wind, which is always together with the very subtle mind. They say it's a bit like a person riding a horse. The very subtle mind is like the person, and the very subtle wind is like the horse. So the two of them are able to, move and go places, do things. And so this very subtle mind is empty of inherent existence. Everything is empty of inherent existence. It's existed from beginningless time. And it will continue up until enlightenment. And that is the thing that actually becomes enlightened mind. So that when we become enlightened, our very subtle mind becomes the wisdom dharmakaya, the Buddha's mind, Buddha's wisdom. And the emptiness of that mind becomes the nature dharmakaya. That means the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. And then the subtlest wind, which is always together with the subtle mind, they're like inseparable. That's what becomes the form bodies, the Rupakaya, Buddha manifesting in different forms to help different beings in different places. So that's the tantric explanation. So we just got one more slide and then I'll stop and you can ask questions. So the last slide is just a summary because this has been a huge amount of material. Some of you are probably feeling overwhelmed, but just to summarize the main points. So according to most of the Mahayana schools, most meaning the Madhyamika school and one of the Chittamatra schools, every sentient being has Buddha nature without exceptions, or even people who do horrible, horrible, horrible things, or beings who are in hell and so on. All of those sentient beings do have Buddha nature, do have the potential to become fully enlightened. So there's only this one type of Chittamatra school that says not everybody. Some can't become enlightened, but anyway, we don't accept that. So, and the second bullet point, they also say that some beings first attain nirvana and then enter the Mahayana and eventually attain Buddhahood. Okay, so on their way to Buddhahood, some beings will first go to nirvana, liberation, but they won't stay there forever. Buddha will make sure that they come out of their absorption or blissful absorption in nirvana and enter the Mahayana path and eventually become Buddhas. So they say there's only one final vehicle. Everybody will eventually follow the Mahayana and reach enlightenment. So this is the Mahayana schools. Now, Vibhashika and Sautrantika, those two schools are not Mahayana. Their view is that only some beings become Buddhas, but everyone else becomes, attains nirvana, attains liberation. And then these different schools point to different things as being the lineage or disposition. Okay, so some say it's non-attachment, that mental factor, virtuous mental factor, non-attachment. Others say it's like a seed or a potential in the mind, or the emptiness of the mind, or the clear light nature of the mind. So when it comes to pointing out what is this lineage, what is this potential, this disposition, they'll point to different things. So you don't really need to know all of this information, what every school says, unless you're interested. It is kind of complicated. But the most important thing is if you want to follow the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Madhyamika explanation, the one that I explained last time, that's the most important one to keep in mind, to understand. And yeah, just to have confidence that we and everyone else, all sentient beings, do have amazing potential, wonderful potential to, of course, to become Buddha. But on the way to Buddhahood, we can develop so many good qualities, loving kindness and compassion and joy and equanimity and wisdom and patience and so on. Just to have confidence that we do have this potential, these abilities. We can change ourselves. We can emerge from being someone who's miserable and depressed and angry and so on and so forth, and become a different kind of person. We have that ability. We have that potential. We have to put effort into it. It's not going to just happen by wishing for it to happen. We do have to make effort, but it's worth it. It's worthwhile to make that effort. It's good for ourselves and it's good for others. So I'll stop there. I've been blah, blah, blah a lot. And we have some time left if anyone would like to ask a question.
And if anyone has a question, you can click the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, send a quick chat message, or even unmute. And it looks like Kathy has the first question. Go ahead, Kathy, you can unmute.
Oh, Venerable Khadro, that was amazing. So full of stuff I'm glad I have your slides. I have a question about Aryas. Would an Arya be a Buddha, but the only reason an Arya is not a Buddha is because an Arya has not cleared their defilements?
Yeah, well, there's different kinds of Aryas. So an Arya in general just means a person who has attained the direct realization of emptiness. Okay. And so as soon as you got that realization, as soon as you've directly realized emptiness, but of course that takes a while to get to that point. So as soon as you get to that point, you're an Arya. And then from that point on, you go through different stages. Okay, so once you have the direct realization of emptiness, that realization will kind of clear away some of your defilements, some of your obscurations, but not all of them. They don't all go at once. They go in layers. So you keep meditating on emptiness, you keep accumulating merit, virtue, and then you kind of gradually get rid of more and more layers of your defilements, your obscurations. And when you've gotten rid of all of them completely, then you become a Buddha. And a Buddha is an Arya. Okay, so a Buddha is an Arya, but not all Aryas are Buddhas. Some Aryas are still on the way to becoming a Buddha. Okay. Is that helpful?
Well, that is helpful. And also when you say, I should probably have you define what you mean by direct realization. That just no more confusion about emptiness. Could you just explain what you mean by that?
Well, it's a little complicated, but there's different ways that we can know things, different ways that our mind is able to know things or experiencing things. One way of dividing it is into conceptual and non-conceptual. Conceptual is when our mind knows something, like, for example, right now we can think about the Dalai Lama. Wherever we are right now, we can close our eyes and think about the Dalai Lama and have a mental picture of the Dalai Lama in our mind. Okay, that's a conceptual mind, as opposed to being in front of the Dalai Lama and seeing him with our eyes. Okay, there's a difference there.
Yeah.
Right. So seeing the Dalai Lama, being in front of him, being in his presence and seeing him with our eyes, hearing his voice with our ears, that's a direct experience, okay, with our very, very direct. Whereas conceptual is going through the medium of a mental image, a conceptual image. Okay? It's when you think about something or you remember something or you fantasize something. You're not experiencing it directly, but using a kind of image, kind of appearance in your mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Okay.
So emptiness, we're talking about emptiness. Emptiness is not an object that we can see with our eyes. It's not a visible thing. Okay, we can't see it with any of our senses. It's kind of abstract. So the first time we understand emptiness, the first time we realize emptiness, we have to use conception. We have to hear teachings about it. We have to think about it. We have to meditate on it. We have to use reasons. And it's kind of a long process, but eventually we get a realization of emptiness. But it's a conceptual realization. We're experiencing emptiness, not directly, but with a kind of image, a mental image of emptiness. And that's great. I mean, when you get to that point, you're already doing really well. But we have to go further than that and get to where we can have a direct realization of emptiness, meaning there's no conceptual image in the way. Our mind is just directly, nakedly experiencing emptiness.
Sounds amazing.
Same way that you would directly see the Dalai Lama if he's sitting right in front of you. So it's a much more powerful experience than the conceptual one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one we need to get. That's the one that will clear away our afflicted emotions and the other obscurations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. It's quite a goal. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And the next question is from Scott Snibby. And I know you did his podcast, right? A Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment. And I actually always link you and Scott together because he used to lead meditations at Chen Ling and was a big fan of your book, How to Meditate. He was the first person that introduced me to your book. So it's kind of neat to be here in a Zoom with you both. So go ahead, Scott.
Thanks. Well, I'm a big fan of Venerable Sangye Khadro. I have a question for you about, these different schools. Especially, I want to ask you about the Chittamatra, because when we first studied these, I bet some other people have the same feeling that we thought, okay, the Madhyamaka is right and the rest are wrong. And but over time, as you study these more, and especially, the Chittamatra has these funny views about a stored consciousness and that some beings don't attain enlightenment. But then over time, as I studied a little bit about it more, and especially learned that Atisha was a Chittamatran,
You learned what?
I learned that Atisha was a Chittamatran, from Jake. Is that not correct? Because that's what I.
No, one of his teachers was a Chittamatra, but
Okay.
Atisha was a Prasangika. That's what they say. Anyway, I don't know. I didn't meet Atisha, but that's what they say about him.
Okay. Yeah, and some other, I guess, I may have misunderstood.
One of his main teachers, I think it was even the one who taught him bodhicitta, the one who was on the Golden Isle of Indonesia. Anyway, I think that one was a Chittamatra.
Well, anyway, my question is, my understanding is imperfect, obviously, but my question is, what's your take on these different views? Is the Madhyamaka really right and the rest are wrong? Or is there some rightness to all of them, depending on, because obviously there were extraordinarily accomplished beings in this traditions too.
Yeah, I mean, they say that we shouldn't just assume that one is right and the others are wrong without having investigated them. We should investigate them. And I've heard it said that, like in the monasteries, when the monks are studying and they spend years and years and years studying, that and debating as well, they actually are advised to take on these different points of view and imagine, I am a Chittamatra. And they even try to defend that in debate and so on. So they're supposed to really try to, play the role of being a follower of these different schools and really examining their views, in a very genuine way. Most of us probably don't have the chance to do that. Often we don't have access to all the teachings and so on. But that's the ideal way of doing it, is to really understand each of these schools and their point of view. But they do say that if we do that and then also study the Madhyamika and their point of view, we will come to see that there are flaws in the others. But that's not to say, I mean, Buddha did teach all of these different schools for different kinds of people. So maybe you are meant to be a Chittamatra or somebody else is meant to be a Vibhashika or whatever. So our teachers, our lamas, they're kind of encouraging us to go for the Madhyamika because they say that's the one that's really correct. That's the one that has the most accurate explanation of emptiness, the true nature of things. The others fall short. The others go part way, but not far enough. That's what they say. And they're saying that not out of prejudice, but because they've really studied and thought about and meditated on and become convinced of this. So they're at that point of being convinced, but you know, I mean, the Dalai Lama says again and again, we need to check things for ourselves and not just blindly follow what the Buddha said or what our teachers said. So it's good to have an open mind and really explore these different views. Is that helpful?
Oh yeah, it's very helpful. You know, at one point when we studied this with Venerable Renee and Emily also, you know, they suggested to really look at yourself and see which view you genuinely are, because we might say we love Madhyamika and that one's right, but if you really look into your mind, like for myself, when I look in my mind, I might be a little bit more Chittamatra in some ways, you know, because I was raised a Christian Scientist actually, which had this belief that there's only mind and there's no matter.
Huh. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, never heard that. So that's an idealist view. Like, I think there's some Western philosophers, Berkeley and Locke, who had a similar view, idealist view. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if it's exactly the same as the Chittamatra, but it's similar.
Thank you.
And the next question is from Lynn.
Lynn, hi. Can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
You're back in the log cabin, which I like very much. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read it. I actually wrote this in chat. And it says, when you say the Buddha will get you out of your, let's say, absorption at some point, it sounds like God when you say the Buddha. Aren't there lots of Buddhas? Did they have different helpful jobs? Is there a task force of, and I've got to scroll now. How do I do this? Scroll, okay. Oh yeah, is there a task force of Buddhas that will get you out of it, absorption, that go after those in blissful absorption and help those beings get back on the path to full enlightenment? You know, when we say the Buddha, and in this case, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I mean, I haven't heard this explained in such detail as you're asking, you know, like, I mean, of course, there are many, many Buddhas. Many Buddhas. I say there's countless Buddhas, and they're kind of all over the universe helping sentient beings. So no, I don't think it's only one single Buddha who does that job of waking up the arhats out of nirvana. So, but I haven't heard exactly how that works. And you know, do they have a rota? And today it's one Buddha, and tomorrow it's another. I don't know.
Right. Okay.
No, don't worry about that. No, it's not that there is one Buddha who's higher than all the others and tells the others what to do.
Right.
Maybe it's, I'm just guessing, maybe it's a question of karmic connection, that one Buddha may have a karmic connection with one particular arhat and is able to get through to that particular arhat more effectively than the other Buddhas, and can kind of, hey, you know, wake up.
Yoo-hoo.
I'm just guessing. It might be like that.
No, that sounds good. That sounds good. I think the minute we say the Buddha, we get into, that's what's, it's always been like, what come on, there's not, except there was Shakyamuni, right? He was
Yeah.
the Buddha. Anyway, thank you. Thanks.
Well, maybe, I mean, this explanation probably comes from the sutras of the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, the one that's in our time, that he explained how this works, and he maybe said, I will do it. But I don't think we have to take that too literally, that he's the only one for all of time who does that kind of job. That,
yeah, okay.
You know, he's just explaining in general, this is how it works, this is how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think of it anyway.
Yeah, that's helpful.
So, Venerable, we are at the end of our scheduled time. We have one follow-up question and one new question. I don't know if you want to take those or...
I don't mind. I guess if anybody needs to go, you can go, but I'm not in a rush. So
Okay. The new question from Curdy was, is Buddha one or many?
well, there's many Buddhas. We do often just talk about the Buddha, but that's because, you know, there was a Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who taught the Dharma in our world, and we are still studying the Dharma that he taught, but he's not the only Buddha for all of time and in all of space. There are many Buddhas.
Thank you. And then Kathy, I think, has a follow-up question.
No, I was just tagging on to Lynn's because I'm glad you asked that question, because Venerable Khadro, when I sit in the room that you're sitting in now and I look at all the Thangkas around me and I see all the many Buddhas, I was always curious, because to me, when you say the Buddha, I think Shakyamuni, but there was also Buddhas before Shakyamuni, correct?
Yeah.
And then there's the Dhyana Buddhas, who are the ones that when we're meditating on the Buddha, that are all the different colors. And then there's all the medicine Buddhas. And so it makes me think that they've all got their specific jobs. You know, they work for the medicine Buddha, or they work for, you know, so I'm glad you asked that, because I don't know. I guess I've never been brave
Well,
enough to
I
ask
mean,
that.
all Buddhas are equal in that they all have the same realizations and they all have the same qualities. And there isn't one Buddha who knows more than another Buddha or who has more compassion than another Buddha. They're all equal. But I guess part of it is certain vows that they made or promises that they made while they were still bodhisattvas on the way to Buddhahood. They will feel a particular aspiration. When I become a Buddha, I want to help sentient beings be free of sickness. So that one becomes the medicine Buddha. But in fact, all Buddhas have the same ability to help sentient beings be free of sickness. But yeah, it partly has to do with what was in their mind and what kind of prayers and aspirations they made while they were on their way to enlightenment. And then that will affect what they specialize in once they become enlightened.
And then
But
you
they
have
all do each
your
other's jobs. They can all do each other's jobs. So
well, then I think of Tara, and I think, wow, she had quite you know, quite a resume.
yeah, she made the promise to always be in the female form to help women. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
But that doesn't mean the other Buddhas aren't helping women too. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, just that's her speciality.
That's
And many
what
women do connect with her quite nicely.
Yeah.
Okay, so stop there.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to have you for a teaching like this. Like I said, like a lot of people in the Zoom room, we all started with your book and advanced our practice, you know, with your book. So it was a real treat to have you, and we hope you come back. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for asking me. I enjoyed doing this, and I hope it's been helpful and not confusing for all of you.
Gewadi nyurdudak mama sangye lugyurne drowa chi kyang malupa Deyi sala go parsho Chanchib sem chogrim poche Ma ke panam ke yurchi Kepanyam pame payang gane gandu pelwarsho. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunat's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you so much, Venerable Sangye Khadro. It was lovely. And so I'm just enjoying your presentation and the excellent explanation. Thank you.
Yeah,
So clear.
it was. And thank you so much, SK. SK Law.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
Come again, please.
Please.
Bye bye.